Yeah, it's like 5 minutes to.
And then here's another one of those chords. It's 5 minutes.
5 minutes to test time.
Right, I have to pee. I should hurry.
Yeah.
I should quit playing around with this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll do it. Oh no, not feeding.
Okay. It is running.
Are you talking to me? Or?
Yeah. So that's that. You might want to watch. Well, that should be fine, but you might have to, live view might go out. You know, we might automatically time out.
Yeah.
So
Just hit it again.
So what?
It just hit it again.
Yeah, I know you know this. I'm just saying that,
And don't touch anything else, because we don't know what made it work.
you know. And there are 11 people watching now, it says.
Wow.
I have a good connection.
What do I do? Moderator access?
That's awesome. And then we're going to do a test in 2 minutes. What? Yeah. It's okay. You can talk.
He's in the litter box.
He's in the litter box.
Yeah, I'm not predicting there.
He'll be out.
There he is.
Bean! Come here. Come here. Oh, You didn't pay for this, but this is Bean, our three-legged shop cat. Right, Bean? He spends most of the day down here with us, but, oh, and there's Luce. Would you,
Yeah.
are you trapped? She can get in. It's okay.
This one?
Yeah. It is live, just so you know.
Okay.
You're fine.
Yeah.
If we don't go live till 4, but we are in test mode. So. My wife, Lucy, you didn't pay for this either. How's it look?
I like it.
Good.
Yeah, we basically stayed with the color and faded too. So,
It's good.
yeah,
Mhm.
she did a weird show test. Whatever. And I made another appointment for 4 weeks.
Awesome.
Yay.
Hooray.
So I need to keep flipping back between moderator and speaker, right?
Whitney said that if the questions don't refresh, that forces the refresh.
Okay.
Hey, Liz,
Yeah,
if you guys order dinner,
yeah.
I want a Yukon sandwich with egg and a side of grits.
You got sandwich with egg inside of yours.
Yeah.
Oh, I know where you're going.
What time are you finished, Handsome?
This should be wrapped up by 5.
Okay.
Might go a little later. Oh, Bean. Okay. We're going to lose Bean. Everybody say goodbye to Bean. Here he goes.
Okay, bye-bye now, people. It's been great knowing you.
Oh,
Oh, he sees the reflection.
yeah.
So we should be in test mode now. Anything from Whitney?
Nothing from Whitney yet. Should I check your email somehow?
You can.
On here, though? Or on there?
Probably on the phone would be best, so we don't.
All right.
When you navigate away from the video screen,
Right.
bad things can happen.
There's nothing there.
There's Bean.
Hi, Bean.
He's a behind the scenes Bean.
At the moment.
Yes.
He usually likes to be up all in our business.
In your business Bean.
Yep.
In your beehive hairdo Bean. Shouldn't we be playing some instrumental music or something during this? Like on C-SPAN? Yeah. Like we're voting?
You could sing.
I could. But then we would have no
But
one
you're not
watching.
going to.
I am not going to. They don't pay me enough to get the guitar out and sing. This is not, I don't even know if this is, ASCAP or BMI or, if they bought. I could be violating someone's copyright,
You could be.
so I won't do it.
Oh, so you don't have your SAG card, so I'm not sure you're allowed to do this.
That's acting.
Maybe you do have your
I won't.
SAG card. I don't know.
That's acting.
I know.
Acting!
You're acting right now.
Brilliant!
You're acting like you're busy.
I am busy. I'm making a stick.
I see that. Nice stick.
This is the most woodworking I've gotten done all day.
I know that. Still no Whitney though. Or anyone.
Is how many people are in the chat?
Wow, there's 17 people watching you make a stick right now.
I don't think they're really watching.
Well, probably not. 18, 19 if you count me. I'm watching.
I'm sorry.
Check your email again. we go. I've sent through a few questions. Are they not coming through? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Maybe we will have to sing.
Whitney, they're not coming through. I hope you can hear me.
You might want to stop, restart the app, like dump the app and get back into it.
Okay.
That seems to be how everything works here today. Just turn it off, turn it back on, and then it works.
And then I gotta find.
It's on the swipe right. It's the fourth page at the bottom.
What?
You'll find it. It's the last page.
Of the.
I have like 4 pages.
Of this?
Oh, I thought you meant the home screen.
No, I didn't find the.
I think you go to sessions, my sessions.
Featured speakers. Okay.
Maybe we should.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was great. Good job, boy. Good job.
Whitney, I have 2 questions here. As long as the note that you can see and hear us, as can the 21 people watching. And yes, we can start at 3:55.
Yeah, we're ready. You might want to check focus.
No, she said everything was good, so I'm not touching
then
anything.
don't check focus.
So I've got them on here too. But then they're also here.
Don't know. You should ask her. If it matters. My talk is sponsored by water. The genius of water.
That was a Cincinnati pun that only I probably got.
So we should sing the theme to WKRP. Bean's like right out of
He's not on.
frame, isn't he?
He's not in.
Bean. Come on, play. Just gonna play with the nuts for a little bit.
All right, well, Whitney said to get started at 3:55, so are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, question number 1. The stake stool you demonstrated had 20-inch legs. All other things being equal material-wise, would 28-inch or 30-inch legs need stretchers? And should the degrees of pitch be less than the 18 degrees?
Yes. I get that question all the time, is that I want to make this a bar stool. I want to make it 6 feet tall. And how big should the legs be? And the answer is I don't really know, because it really can depend on if the material has been rived, if the grain is dead straight, and what its diameter is. And so I would mock it up and see if it needs it. I suspect that stretchers were invented by somebody who was building a stake stool without stretchers, and it was unstable, and they're like, wait, we need to add stretchers to stabilize it. So give it a go and add the stretchers before you glue it up if you need to. As far as the resultant angles, I would do what looks good, make it look good. Don't make them straight up and down. So, sticking with these resultant angles probably would make, if you added 6 or 7 more inches, it'd be a trip hazard. So you might want to, plan it so that they end up kind of in the same, profile vertically. But I hope that's a good answer. Oh, by the way, hello, everybody. Welcome to our shop. First question down. I'm Chris. Megan Fitzpatrick, who works in my shop with me, is behind the camera, and she'll be asking the questions. And thank you all for coming.
And Bean might make an appearance.
And what?
Our cat might make an appearance.
Yeah, Bean might make an appearance, but don't pay him. No, never mind.
All right. On a cutler's bench, would it work to put threads on legs and mortises instead of the wedge tenon?
Sure, lots of people have done that, and then you make it breakdown. So if you have a thread box and a tap that can do it, then that would be really cool. The only problem I have encountered when I have fooled around with that, and I have fooled around with that, is getting the tenons to end up perfectly flush at the terminus when the thing is already all seated against the shoulder. So give it a go. What some people have done is they have cut the threads through the seat and then plugged it in the top, like with a decorative patch, so that it's snugged up against the shoulder below, but there was still some gap between that and the patch. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, send Megan a message and I'll explain it to her.
Thanks for 2 brilliant presentations.
Oh, you're welcome.
It became vividly clear in a way that the written word does not convey what heavy cuts you can take with that cambered iron on the jack. Do you use the same blade for all work with the jack plane?
I only have one blade in my jack. It's, like I think I mentioned, it's about a 10-inch radius, and you don't need anything fancy. This is what I use for all my cuts with my jack. It's the original Stanley blade for this, about 110 years old.
Take it out and hold it up.
Oh, I thought I was showing the mouth, but yeah, you can take like enormous cuts and just one-handed too. So if you haven't done this is like one of the big eye-opening experiences for hand planers, is when they get that radius iron and they realize all the things they can now do. It's way different than a straight iron.
You made the joints as straight cylinders. Was there ever any evidence that these joints were tapered?
Not in these stools, or in the Birmingham stools, or in the Parisian stools. Generally, vernacular furniture, 99% of it, every piece of vernacular, and I would definitely count this as vernacular, uses straight cylinders and not tapered. Tapered joints show up more in the where the tenon is tapered and it goes into reamed mortise that is tapered. Shows up much more in factory-made goods or high-end Windsor style seating. Vernacular is just straight holes.
All right. I have lower back issues that I am reminded of when I don't watch my posture and use my legs when planing. Doing that type of work while seated appears to put a lot of strain on your back. Do you find that to be true?
No, not at all. I don't have a great back either. And a lot of times I find myself, when my back is acting up, I'm going to turn to the lower workbench. It's funny. You look at pictures of people and their postures and it looks bad. And people have pointed out, oh my gosh, you must be in agony. And it's like, no, I think the picture exaggerates a lot of things. I'd give it a try. Try it. You don't have to build one of these. Try it. Get a saw bench and install a stop at the end of your saw bench and play around with it a little bit. The forces are completely different. You're not using your legs like you are when you're planing at a high bench.
And I don't have any more questions at the moment, so riff on something.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's always when I run out of things to say, is when we have no questions. So either we're having a technical problem or there's really nobody who has any questions for us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about other variants of this stool that I think are kind of interesting. Like I said, there's a Birmingham version and it has 4 legs. And the Birmingham version is 4 legs and they're much more square in section. And so look up Birmingham stool, and they were jeweler stools because Birmingham is much more known for jewelry. And there's some Parisian versions, and those of course are really curvaceous and sexy. But I think Megan has another question for us.
I do. How did you get interested in these stools?
I was watching it on the TV. I was watching this program, and they have this program over in Great Britain that is sort of like Pickers. And I don't know how I was watching it, but it was like in the middle of the night. And there was this container or storage facility that was absolutely filled with these and Birmingham stools. And I was like, where did these come from? And the guy said they were Cutler stools. And so I just started hunting around until I found a couple dealers who dealt in these stools. And it sort of followed the trail from there, and I'm still on the trail. There's still a lot more to research about them, but they're just kind of fascinating vernacular work stools. And we have 2 of them around the shop now, and they're really nice.
Who made these stools? Was it a company, or were they made by individual artisans for their personal use?
That's the question that we don't have answered. Is how these stools were made. Were they made commercially? Some of the dealers that I've talked to about these say that, well, what happened was the person in the factory found a piece of scrap and made a stool for his or herself from scraps they would find at the factory. And while that may be true for some stools, what's funny is how consistent these were. You see, I've seen 200 of them, and they all have this general seat shape. They all have the same general pitch of legs, all those crazy ring turnings. That suggests to me that it was probably, an individual, a series of little mesters that might have done it. And so that's definitely what happened in Birmingham. The story there is a little more well known, that there was a company that specialized in these stools, and they would bring the stools to your place and cut down the legs to your height. And there were some ads that I've seen for this service. So I wish I knew the answer.
All right. What is the drill bit that you use to drill the holes for the stool?
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit. So this is what's called a Scotch eye auger. And I have a couple T augers, the giant ones that you see for boat building and bunghole reaming and all your favorite big hole makings. But if this is something, if you type in Scotch, like Scotch tape, I-E-Y-E auger, you'll find these guys, and they're popular with bushcraft enthusiasts. And you can, they come in a variety of sizes, all the way down to like, I think 3/8, maybe half an inch, and go all the way up to 2 inches. And they work in dry wood, they work in wet wood, and you just, put whatever size stick through that hole. You can make the stick as long as you like, which makes it easier to turn, but it also makes it easier to whack yourself in the head. But they're a modern and much cheaper alternative than trying to rehabilitate a giant T auger.
On your low bench, it looks to me like the face vise would make seated planing awkward for a right-handed person working across your body. Is there a reason it doesn't or can't go on the back, the opposite of a standing bench?
Nope. Put it wherever you like. I put this here to imitate a bench that I was imitating. So imitating the bench I was imitating. Nice language, Chris. But it was a French bench, and so this is where it was shown. And I always try to make the thing like it was before I try to improve it. Definitely, you can. What's great about having the thread box and the tap is that you can put these everywhere. You can put them in your kitchen countertop if you want. But if it doesn't work, if you don't like them here, you cut them flush and put some over on the other side. I don't think it's awkward here necessarily. Like I said, sometimes body language is deceiving. I'm just an awkward person. I mean, let's just face it. I look awkward I look like a giant orangutan sometimes. I don't have that fluid motion that you see. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah, it doesn't feel awkward to me. But yeah, try it wherever you want.
Do you have a plan that shows the spacing and layout for the peg holes?
One of my plans before I did this today was to put up a photo. I'm going to put up a drawing of the seat plan.
I think it's for the bench.
Oh, for the bench. Well, I hate to say it, the book Ingenious Mechanics, which I wrote, has plans for 3 Roman workbenches in it, not this one. This bench was actually published by Popular Woodworking as a sitting bench. I can't talk. As a sitting bench. It's called the Skansen, Skansen bench, and you can find the plans free online at Popular Woodworking, my former employer. Sorry about that, Fine Woodworking. And that's where you'll find this bench. But really, all it is it's just what we would call a pig bench in Arkansas, which is just a slab of wood. This is 2 2x12s that are glued face to face, and then 4 legs stuck in, and you're good to go.
Do you find your legs bumping into the threaded rods on the side vise? I find my legs bumping into them.
Into these?
Yeah, I walk into them all the time.
Oh, well, when we walk by it, yeah, until we got used to it, we both kneecapped ourselves. But then we kind of got used to it after 3 kneecappings, so we would not do well in the mafia. What's worse, I will tell you, let me say this. I love it that they're so low because they hit me in the kneecap. When I had these on a high bench, it was like, let's just say it was like a do-it-yourself vasectomy a couple times. So, yeah, sorry about that. I'm never going to get back asked to Williamsburg, am I?
Let's move on. How do you recommend sizing the height of the bench in relation to the user?
If we're talking about the low bench, you think? Or it's bench.
I'm guessing it's the low bench because it's a 3-part question with the other.
Oh, a tripart question. Tripartite question. Tripart is just 3-part. Yeah, no tate.
Tight. Anyway.
Your knee height. No, it really is. So you can see it's just below my kneecap. So it's right where you would put a saw bench. And that is the sweet spot for them. About 18 inches.
Did you pattern your high vise after a specific early example, or did you make it up yourself?
The high vise which is what Benchcrafted calls their commercial version, was I first encountered it like 18th century France. They would call it the Etu, E-T-A-U-X, which translates as what? Etat. That sounds like hee-haw. But let's just say the French. Yeah, but that word translates as vise. So it doesn't really tell you if it's high or low. But those vices were very common. They also show up in Germanic communities. Like if you go to Old Salem, they have a number of them that they use. And the way that they would be used is sometimes they would be clamped to the workbench, but a lot of times they would also be secured by the tail vise in the gap between the tail vise, moving jaw, and the bench top. They're great vices. I just would not do well without one these days. So, and they are historically correct, back to 18th century or maybe earlier.
Can you talk about the stool that your microphone is on?
Well, we'd have to get Peter Follansbee. This is a joint stool that Peter Follansbee made and was on the cover of his joint stool book that he did with Jenny Alexander. And I purchased it, was lucky enough to purchase it from him. And it's one of the many stools you can come sit on if you ever visit us. We love that stool.
Did some of those working stools, I think we're back to the steak one now, have square legs? And
Yeah.
you answered that, but it was before 4 o'clock, so let's answer it again.
Yeah, the Birmingham stools had square legs. I haven't seen Sheffield pattern with square legs, but that does not mean it didn't happen. But the Sheffield ones, the ones I've seen, are either the ring turnings or they're turned round or shaved round-ish.
On your low bench, what recommendations do you have for what to make the top out of? I noticed that yours is 2 pieces with one inverted then fastened together.
Yeah, the way I made them originally was I was copying originals.
That's 2.
That's 2, yeah. Originally, I was doing the original thing. And so when I made a version from Salzburg, which was the Roman fort in Germany, and that's the oldest extant workbench we have, and it's a low workbench from about 187 Common Era. That one was oak, and I made that one to the print. And it was just a big, thick slab of like 2 3/8 oak by about 11 or 12 wide and a little longer than this one. But there is no set dimension for these benches, and there's no set material. I would say, recommended. I mean, they're sort of vernacular, and so it's a slab. This is, like I mentioned earlier, 2 2x12s from the home center that are yellow pine, but you could do it with fir or whatever is available in your area. And I just planed them flat and then glued them face to face, and that's plenty thick and strong for working or sitting.
A follow-up to the jack plane camber question. There's 2 of them, actually. I have a smaller camber on my jack and use a scrub plane for the rough work, but will definitely get a heavier camber blade for my jack, as I liked how wide the cut looked compared to what the scrub does. That was a statement. Follow-up part 2. I find the lesser jack camber great, though, for precision planing a la David Charlesworth. Would you use your jack for precision work, too, or rather switch to another plane?
Well, the jack for me is a roughing tool, and it is the one that just hogs material off. When I first bought this plane from this really stoned hippie at the Burlington Arts and Antique Fair back in the 90s for $12, I'm just padding this, people. This was the only plane I had. I didn't even have a block plane. I had a block plane, but it was Popular Mechanics from Walmart. Then I would switch blades all the time. So this was my smoother, this was my jack, this was my joiner, this was everything. So yeah, you can, buy one plane if you don't have the money, and you can swap irons out. Now when I need to do precision planing, I don't really do it a la Charlesworth, because I'm a Schwarz, not a Charlesworth. I'm not as precision as David. But I just use a smoothing plane, and it has a cambered iron. All my bench planes have cambered irons. That's kind of traditional based on, tradition.
This is Chris speaking in tautological sentences today.
Yeah.
Any new explanations about 8-legged benches?
The new explanation, Yeah, I built an 8-legged bench, and I think I mentioned that in the presentation. And there's no reason to do it. I have no clue why it, and I've never seen another one since. And so no, don't do it. Because it was crazy. It was crazy leveling 8 legs to the floor, and we thought we did it because we thought, well, maybe it will always find 4 legs. So we'll always find, like having a 3-legged stool, we'll always find and it didn't work. Didn't work at all.
And everybody made fun of you.
Yeah, everybody made fun of me for having an 8-legged bench, like I was compensating for something.
Is there evidence of 18th century cabinet makers / furniture makers using low benches in their work? And if so, for what operations were they used?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of them. If you look in Hulot, 18th century French text, which is mostly about chair making, but also about turning. Hulot is chock full of people in the 18th century using low workbenches. When you look at Jonathan Fisher, 18th century Maine craftsman in Blue Hill, Maine, he had a low bench, and it was one which had all the peg holes that we talked about. And I'm sure there are other examples I could dig up, but those are two. And Roubaud has low benches. Andre Roubaud's L'Art de Menuisier. So that's 1776, 77, 77. Those have low benches in them. What were they used for? I mean, the same thing you would use any bench for. They could be used for planing. They can be used for assembly work. They can be used for sawing. They didn't write down a lot of that stuff in the 18th century. There wasn't a lot of how-to literature out there. And I don't know if they appear in Diderot or not. For woodworking, I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
For the Roman holdfast, did you and Peter talk about the possibility that it might have been brass?
No.
Yes.
Yeah, moving on. No, we didn't. The Romans had a lot of iron. They did have brass work too, of course, but almost everything in the Roman workshop, everything is iron. And so I think that was our first inclination, just because so much of I can't think of any Roman tools that were bronze or brass. Most of it was decorative stuff. But doesn't mean it won't work. It probably would work just fine.
Newbie question. That was in the question. I'm not saying that. It's not a judgment. For the iron holdfast, what is their diameter and the diameter of the holes that are optimal?
There isn't one answer. This one is for a 1 inch, and 1 inch, inch and a quarter, inch and 3/8 is what you'll see in pre-industrial holdfast, stuff that were made by blacksmiths. Modern holdfasts, Megan, I think, is going to hand me one here. Modern holdfasts are much smaller, and these are from Gramercy, tools for working wood. They're great. They're very inexpensive if you've never used holdfast and you don't know if it will work. This is a blacksmith-made 3/4 inch one that I bought many years ago. The 3/4 inch ones became popular because they sync up with the 3/4 inch dogs that everybody was using. This started about in the late 90s, early 2000s. Before that, if you look at, I'm going to go way back to the 1980s. If you go back then to the Schobergs, those benches all used 1 inch dogs and 1 inch holdfasts and all that. So there was definitely a switch, and it wasn't that long ago when everything went to a 3/4 inch standard. I prefer the heavier holdfast, the heavier, the thicker. It seems to hold better, but it definitely has more of a presence. So that's not really a newbie question. It's a great question because lots of people are stymied by that difference.
Do you want to talk about your holdfast?
No.
Okay. Can you give more details about tapered legs in the Roman workbench?
Tapered legs in the Roman workbench.
Is that the Holy Roman?
Well, I've done tapered legs in 2 workbenches. One was the Sahlberg workbench, which I think I showed in the presentation. And I believe those start at 2 inches and they're square and they taper to, I think, 1.5 inches up at the top. And then there are square mortises that go into a square tenon. Then the tenons are wedged diagonally. So I think it tapers from about 2 inches to like 1.5 inches. And I just did those with a jack plane.
Right. Why do you think this type of workbench died out?
It hasn't died out. I mean,
The low bench?
sorry?
The low bench, I think?
No, the low bench hasn't died out. We're just blind to it. You know, you probably, if you do chair making, you sit on one all the time. It's a shaving horse. There are now people making bowl horses for carving bowls. I would argue that saw benches are kind of a stunted version of it. I think what happened is that they just became less common in furniture making shops for whatever reason. You know, you don't see them show up in furniture or cabinet making shops in the late 19th or 20th centuries. But what is curious is they never disappeared from the farm. Like when I go and visit 19th century farms here or chair makers in Appalachia, that's what's funny is if we go out to Eastern Kentucky and visit chair makers who make ladder backs, people like Chester Cornett, they are still using these Roman workbenches for chair making, the low ones. Hasn't changed at all. We're just blind to it. So they're around. You just have to open your eyes and then you'll see them everywhere. Go to the antique store and you'll probably stumble on one.
Is it possible they're being used as seating?
Is it possible they're being used as seating? Oh yeah, that's the other thing is they were used for everything. You know, I mean, like the same way I use my other benches for eating lunch or when we serve a buffet meal here, these low benches are for seating too. And like the Jonathan Fisher bench, I suspect was used in the house at times or for guests or whatnot, overflow seating, which is what we use ours for. So yeah, they're kind of multi-purpose.
How refined are the secondary surfaces of the Sahlberg bench? Are there axe marks or ribbon surfaces, or was more care taken to flatten and square? And do you think the bench was more quickly and roughly made for the short term or for the long haul?
I examined every millimeter of that bench and drew it, examined the grain, examined everything we could about it. Showed my notes and photos to Peter Galbert. Peter Galbert suspects that the top was rived out, that it was split from a whole log and then shaped. There are evidence of work on it, so there are going to be axe marks. There are chisel marks all over it. Obviously, the mortises were hacked out, and the question about was it rough or was it for fine work? The problem is in compared to what in Roman times. There are 2 other workbench tops at Sahlberg. They both look the same. The other problem we run into with Roman wooden goods is that these were underwater and they were waterlogged from 187 until about 1899 when they were pulled out of the well for the first time. And when they were pulled out, it was like they were new. All the wooden goods. So there are yokes and there are all these things that were pulled out and they were just perfect. But then when they dried, they all contorted. So the bench, which I showed a picture of, it looks black and it looks nasty and twisted. That's not what it looked like when it came out. And we've seen some drawings of other artifacts from Sahlberg and other waterlogged stuff that was dried and not, there was no, at the time, there was no way to kind of stabilize it like they've done with the Mary Rose or any of the other kind of ships that sank. So we really don't know. Really don't know. And I suspect that those benches were used for a wide variety of things. They had a planing stop, but there was much less specialization. And so if it was used for friendly height, neighbor. If it would be used for things other than for carpentry.
Can a high bench be used as a low bench by using a standing platform to effectively lower the height?
Go for it. I mean, you'd probably have to build a platform that would be as high as a low bench. And then so you'd have built a low bench. And so just use the platform as a low bench. If you want to experiment with a low bench, the problem with using a high bench as a low bench is that most high benches are going to be 20 inches wide. And that's going to feel like you're at the doctor. So when you're trying to straddle it. So if you want to experiment with it, get a 2x12, get a couple 2x12s. You could screw them together temporarily and put them up on blocks or a couple buckets, 5-gallon buckets, and you'll definitely get a real feel for what it's like to work at one.
If you were going to use a brace and bit to drill the holes in the stool top, what would you recommend?
A smaller diameter. I tried to turn 1.5 inches with a brace and bit, and even with a 10 or 12-inch sweep, I was really struggling in oak. You can do it in pine. So my recommendation is switch to a softer wood, like poplar or pine for the top, and then you'd be able to drill the hole no problem with a brace and bit. Or switch to a T-auger, and then you can do it in oak.
Where did you get the cabinet behind you? Tell us about your shop.
The cabinet behind me is not really a cabinet, it is a bar. So that's the back bar for this building. So we are the first non-bar tenants in this building. It was built in 1896 as a fancy grocery and German bar. Kind of the center of this German area's social life, with a beer garden out back, and has been a bar or cafe during Prohibition up until when we bought it, when it was called the Blaze, and it was kind of it was a rough place, and so we gutted the whole place except for the back bar, which is behind the tool walls there. And we left the back bar, which is original. It was built up on Central Avenue here in Cincinnati. There's still a plate on it. But the problem with the back bar is there's this giant, like 15-foot long mirror that's still intact there. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to look at myself working all day. It's really kind of makes me very self-conscious. This is hard enough, but imagine looking at yourself mess up constantly. So we wanted to find a way to use that space a little better. We publish books here. We don't have the machines here, but we do the layout and editing and photography and all that. So sometimes we have open days here where we welcome customers in. And when we do that, we take those tool walls off, and behind them are giant bookshelves that are filled with the books that we use, books that we sell. So it's kind of a multi-purpose space. And it's also designed to look like, a back shop wall for all the common tools.
In the 18th century, would the sliding bevel used to lay out the angles have been a shop-made wooden tool, or were they manufactured?
18th century, all the ones I've seen were wood. That's what Roubaud shows. That's what Hulot shows. And they may not have even used a sliding bevel. If I were in production for these and I were working with people, I would just give them a stick of wood that had a 20-degree angle on it and say, use this. And so they can't adjust it or move it. So there are lots of ways around it to get a dedicated angle. But they were definitely wood. And I've used wooden ones and they're great, but I love my metal ones.
You just mentioned Hulot, so I'm jumping ahead for a few questions. Why do you think Hulot's book is less well known to period woodworkers today than Moxon and Roubaud?
Probably because no one's written much about Hulot. We've translated parts of it, and parts of it we translated for a book on ingenious mechanics. There are some wonderful books out there. L'Exploitation du Bois by Duhamel. Exploitation of Wood, which is the first book to explore wood movement and a lot of green woodworking techniques. It's the first green woodworking book. That's also from the same time period. There is Duhamel also did a great book on glue. So there are lots of texts out there that just need to be translated and republished, and I'm trying. I mean, there's only one life to live.
Don't you think your low bench needs some sort of cross bracing or gussets? It looks like it would sway a lot when you are planing.
Well, as I mentioned, this bench wasn't designed to be a workbench. At first, it was a sitting bench. And if it ever does start to sway, I will add gussets or reinforcement. But one of the things that's interesting about these benches is that they don't have the same forces acting upon them. You're stabilizing the bench and immobilizing the work between you and your body. So it's not like you are pushing the whole thing forward like you are with a tall bench. It's I encourage you to try it. It's a very interesting and different experience.
There's probably someone tuning in late. What type of wood did you use for the low bench you're sitting on, and how thick is it?
Yeah, yellow pine, 2x12s. You can glue them face to face, and this bench is probably $20 worth of wood.
And it's about 3 inches thick then.
Yeah, I'd say it's almost. After I planed it down, let's say, 2 and 3/4, something like that. That's thick enough.
How thick does the top have to be for a low workbench?
I've seen them about 2 inches thick is the smallest dimension I've seen for a working bench.
Have you looked at the Lund stool, L-U-N-D? And if so, how does it compare to these?
It's very similar. I mean, we're talking about the Viking stool, I think, is the Lund stool, or am I wrong? Yeah, I hope we're talking about this. I'm thinking of the same stool. I think it's a Viking 3-legged stool, very similar in shape, vernacular piece with the irregularly shaped seat and three legs. If I'm wrong, send me a message and I'll try to answer your question on the app.
And I'm waiting for some more questions to be sent through here now. So maybe you could talk about the Moravian stool, if only I could find it.
It's right there.
Oh, we're using it. Oh dear.
Well, you can swap it out with one of the other many benches we have.
Or this could go down on the ground. Maybe. Okay, so this was a bad idea.
Megan of the bad ideas.
That's me.
Yeah.
I'm full of bad ideas. Okay. Well, so this is another form of stool that hasn't been asked about yet, but I'm riffing now.
Yeah, we talked about this one
Sorry.
on the presentation a little bit. Like the question we get a lot about it is why wood movement hasn't absolutely destroyed this, because we have the grain running this way on the seat, and then the battens have restrained the top from moving, and a lot of them are cracked right here, especially because this is the weak spot right where the handle is. But
And funnily enough, there is a question about it now.
okay.
Could you talk more about the Moravian stool, what you're doing? Any gotchas that are different from building the 3-legged stool?
Well, the sliding dovetail is, people are intimidated by them, but they really shouldn't be. I mean, they're pretty easy to do. The one trick that I find with sliding dovetails by hand, which is the only way I would do them, is fitting them. So like you drive them in when you're fitting them, and it starts out just fine, but then it gets tighter and tighter, and then it gets stuck. So what I do is, after I have created the male part and the female part, I'll go to this batten part and I will just relieve this part in the middle by like maybe 3 plane strokes, here on this dovetail, here on this dovetail. So when it goes in, it feels tight, and then it encounters the relieved area. So then it just goes in at about the same, the only part that's tight is right on one end. And then when you hit the other end in, that's when it really tightens up. And so you have it tight here and tight here, and you don't see this middle area. That's kind of my biggest biggest recommendation. There aren't really, I mean, the Moravian stool, there's not much to it as far as trickiness. The legs are octagonal. The tenons are cylindrical. Obviously wedge them opposite the grain of the top, and you'll be fine. And paint to hide your mistakes, as always. But they're extraordinarily strong too. Like that's the one thing about it is like this weighs almost nothing, and this weighs like it's a collapsed star. This is way cooler. I mean, I love these because they're cool and chunky, and you can build one in really about an hour. This one takes about a day.
We have confirmation that the Lund stool is indeed the Viking one, so that's good.
I'm not an idiot.
And there are lots of questions on how to spell Hulot.
Hulot. M, first letter M. I forgot what his is it. Is it Marcel? I don't know. It's M Hulot. M as in Mary. Hulot. Hulot.
There's no
what
accent over the O.
I don't know. If you go get the book, it's in the box back there.
I think it's an accent aigu, but whatever.
You don't want to go get the book? Well, we can look at the book.
Oh, it's the one in the box?
It's the one in the box. Yeah, we have a copy of Hulot here.
All right, well, we'll pull it out here in just a second. In the meantime, you can answer this one while I go get that. Is there a reason to use the sliding dovetail rather than nailing the battens on?
Yeah, sliding dovetail versus nailing the battens. This is a Germanic stool, also found in Swiss countries, and they were very persnickety and precise about it. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of these stools. I don't think I've seen more than a couple that were nailed together. But if you want to nail it, I would nail it and clench it. So I would drive the nails through and do it against another hammer or a bucking block or a piece of steel to bend the nail back in, and that would help. But sliding dovetails are fun by hand, especially. They don't take that much time. So Megan has.
All right, I brought you Hulot and one of the volumes of Rougeau.
Yeah. So here we have these little pocket handbooks from the 18th century. So we have a copy of Hulot here. It's unbound, but so it's the Art of the Turner, and I'll show you the title page, and you will be able to then capture it on your phone and then just run it through Google Translate.
You are right in that sunbeam, and it's kind of hard to. There you go.
So this is on rag paper. The Art of the Mechanical Turner by M. Hulot. And then there's a bunch of other people who were involved in it. And this is the first part. But it's a gorgeous book. And here I hope I don't completely tear it apart. And if I were really fortunate, I would be able to find the plate that has low benches. But what's interesting about it is this came out after Rougeau, and no, there are some plates in here that Rougeau did for Hulot, because Rougeau illustrated a lot of his own plates. Here's Hulot's lathe, which several people have made. I know I've not made it, but I've seen copies of it.
You can't see that unless you hold it up.
Yeah. Okay. This is what I'm really looking for.
Okay.
So here is, I didn't break it. That part was not,
There you go.
that part was not bound. So this is the low bench shown in Hulot. Here's that little block that I demonstrated. So here's that block. And some of the other really cool gadgets on this. There's a planing stop here. This is the mortising area. So when you want to mortise legs, you put them between these two blocks, and then you drive wedges to secure them. And this is still used. When I went and saw Chester Cornet's workbench, that's how he mortised legs. It hadn't changed since 18th century France. And then down here you have, these are the bibs. So when you're working here with a drawn eye for spoke shave or whatever, you would secure the other end of the leg against this bib, and then you would press it up against the block. And then this bib is used with the for boring. And so you would, instead of I don't know how you would do it otherwise, but you would you would put the point here in the brace into one of these holes, and then you would lean your body onto the whole thing and turn it. So that gives you the oomph in case you are very lightweight Frenchman.
And that's kind of hard to see. Are we able to put a picture of it on the website for people?
Sure, we can take a picture of this and I can put it up on the social board, and you'll be able to take a look at it. But yeah, somebody should do something with Hulot.
All right, moving on from Hulot.
Okay.
Why do you call them Roman workbenches? Could they have been from Egypt? And were these sorts of load benches ever used in America?
They couldn't have been Egyptian. I mean, the Egyptians, as far as we know, were the first to show and illustrate woodwork and a lot of the joints that we're familiar with, mortise and tenon and all that. But they don't really show anything that looks like a workbench. They have lathes. So we don't think they were Egyptian, but we do see them show up in Rome and Pompeii. But the interesting thing is that Pompeii was a Greek settlement, so that you could say they're just as likely that they were Greek workbenches as Roman benches, because they were Greeks, but they were in the Roman Empire. And they absolutely did migrate to America. As we were talking about earlier with Jonathan Fisher's bench, is that they show up and are still used by chair makers today in a lot of rural areas. So yeah, they're American.
All right. I just want to let folks know that we did get started slightly early, and so with the lag, there are probably a few questions that were probably answered before 4 p.m., but of course you can rewatch this since it is virtual, and it will be available for viewing again for your viewing pleasure. Sorry, that was a note from CW to let you guys know. And was there a functional reason for the hurricane tighteners on the bench vise, or was that more of an aesthetic choice?
Yeah, the hurricane nuts. This is not really a geometrical shape that I've been able to figure out. I tried to figure out I got out my George Walkerness and my dividers and tried to figure out the secret of the hurricane nuts on the History Channel this month. And they're just sketched. They're this kind of interesting shape. And all I can think of is that if you have them arranged this way, then you press your palm to tighten them, and so you can really exert a lot of downward pressure, and then you can use your fingers to pull up on the other part of the hurricane. And the cool thing about these is that you can experiment with it the other way. So we can flip this on here. And so now we have a reverse hurricane nut. This is the southern hemisphere hurricane nut, which turns the other way. And then when you do this, when you work with this, you quickly find that this is horrible. I mean, because you're tightening it by pressing down on the point and it bites into your palm. They're easier to release, but who cares about that? So I think it's not only aesthetics, but I think there's a functional part. And that's a really good question.
Teeth on metal planing stops scare me. Allay my fears.
I have never cut myself on a planing stop, and I've been using them for so long. The way I look at it is that metal planing stops are no different than having a chisel on your workbench, or any sharp tool, a carving tool, V-tool. Is that when you do put it on your bench, you become very aware of its presence there, and you you act accordingly. So I've never cut myself. And I used to say, I've never heard of anybody cutting themselves until, of course, some guy on the internet did it and showed everybody that he cut himself. And of course, the whole world then went crazy on planing stops and how they were going to kill us all. But I just love metal planing stops and encourage people to try them. And if you don't like it, you can take the planing stop out and then you're just working against wood, or you can hammer a little piece of wood onto its teeth and muzzle those teeth. But I don't know what else to say except that the one other thing I will say is that I read a lot about workshop injuries. So when you read a lot of accounts of people getting injured in workshops, which it happens in places where you read about in Mayhew, like in London's Labor, London's Poor. Is that what I forget the title of it? But Mayhew, and they talk about injuries. You never hear anybody talking about getting injured by a planing stop. People, chisel injuries, all the stuff you would expect are pretty common, but you don't hear about people being incapacitated and put into the poorhouse by a planing stop.
Roman workbench. How do I get tapered legs into the top with rake and display? I've only bored straight holes or used small readers for angled and then staked. That's probably a typo that I'm not understanding. Anyway, how do I get tapered legs into the top with the rake and display?
When you drill the hole with the compound angle, with its rake and splay, and however you do that, whether you do it with two sliding bevels, or whether you do it with sightlines and resultants, or you just do it by Kentucky windage, just by going for it. Any of that. When you're trying to check your angle, you don't check it against a tapered leg. You check it against like a dummy leg. I use like a piece of broom handle. There's one in my bench, in my chest, in the second drawer. And so I have just a straight cylinder. And so when I drill it, I check it and I'm like, I'm a little off. And so, this goes into, this is for a tapered one, but you don't have to do it for a tapered one.
No, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And then you have this to reference it against. And that way you can get the exact angle. And I hope I'm answering the question correctly.
I'm probably not asking it correctly. But that's all I got. Do you find that people are starting to become convinced about the usefulness of low benches? Have your readers made any new discoveries about their use?
I don't think I've made any progress with low workbenches. And I never thought I would. And I don't care because I love them and I use them all the time. It's just, they're a joy. And I get to sit down and work and save energy. And it's a very pleasurable, like if you like working on a shave horse, you're going to love working on a low workbench. Yes, I have had readers who make them, and they do contact us, and we do swap ideas back and forth. And I got one great one from a guy in Brazil who showed how he adapted his low workbench for making sort of Brazilian. It's not a guitar; it's an instrument that's very much like a guitar from Brazil, and just fascinating stuff. You just like any workbench, you find ways to add accessories to it that can do all the tasks that you want it to. But basically, it's a place for wedging stuff and clamping stuff, and it's not that much different. But you're sitting down.
Do you think maybe these low benches were used in rural areas and high benches were used in cities?
That's probably a good generalization. And you don't see city, plates like in Hazen or any of the other, which is panorama of work. You don't see images of the high workbenches necessarily used in city shops like London. But I can't say. I mean, we don't know for sure, but we do know that low benches are still found in farms here in America and used quite often. That's why they call them pig benches. They'll use them for slaughtering and for other workshop tasks.
Does anyone make low benches commercially for sale?
Well, Megan Fitzpatrick, I hear, will do it. I was talking to Mark Hicks at Plate 11 in Missouri. He makes really nice French workbenches in his shop, and he talked about wanting to do one of these. So if you reached out to Mark, I feel pretty certain he would do one. He makes shaving horses too, but I can tell you, I know where you can get one for $20, and it's Home Depot. You make it yourself, and it can. But I know some of us love to build furniture instead of building benches, and I'm one of those people too. But I really love to build benches.
In Ingenious Mechanics, you show a low bench converted to a shave horse. How practical is this, and are there other adaptations?
Yeah, I converted one of the low benches and added a English style shave horse attachment to it. It works really well. That bench is on loan up in Amish country, Colonial Homestead, and Dan Raber up there wanted to borrow it, and I don't know if he's ever going to give it back. He seems to like it. I use the shave horse quite a bit. I'm not a shave horse. My chair making doesn't use a lot of shave horses. I'm much more of a Hewlett. That didn't come out right. But it does work quite well. Other accessories, I mean, anything anything you can add to a high workbench, you can add to a low workbench. As I showed in the demonstration, I put on a high vise on this thing, and the high vise is just another sort of game changer, because then it brings, you're sitting down and it brings this work up right here, and then all of a sudden it's like a stitching pony if you were in leather work, or it's very much like a marquetry donkey. I mean, the low benches are the foundation of all the kind of seating, the cobbler's benches and all that you see. That's a low workbench with accessories added. If you look in Roubaud in the garden woodwork volume, you're going to see a lot of low workbenches that are used for garden and green woodwork, but with their sort of accessories.
On work stools, what do you think made the ring turnings on the legs?
Yeah, I know I said I had ideas and I didn't want to say them out loud, but I'll say them out loud here because we're live and no one will ever remember this, because this is vodka. No, it's not vodka. I look at those ring turnings, and they are all exactly 3/8 of an inch apart and 1/16 of an inch deep. And so what I'm on the hunt for is some sort of early, Victorian machine, lathe machine that was just, turning down turning blanks for furniture, and that would be kind of the way you would get them in the rough. Like they had a machine with a bunch of knives that would just come in and take square down to round, and the knives just were all 3/8 of an inch apart and would stop when it got to 2 inches and would stop cutting. That's what it looks like to me, but who knows? I'm probably wrong.
What kind of glue would have been used in these stools, or did they even glue them?
Hi, neighbor. Well, that's one thing about having an urban shop is your neighbors are going to look in, and sometimes they're prostitutes, but not this time. Sorry, neighbor. Well, almost certainly these would have, if they did use glue, it would have been hide glue, because, polyvinyl acetate, the yellow glue of the scourge of the world, wasn't invented until about World War II. So it would have been some sort of animal protein glue, if they even used it. A lot of vernacular chairs that I encounter, Welsh, Scottish, Irish, have no evidence of glue whatsoever. They're just wedged.
Wouldn't the tapered tenon leg act as a wedge, much as an ill-positioned and wedged straight tenon?
So I think what you're saying is, wouldn't a wedged, a tapered tenon like this, that when I drive it into a leg, that wouldn't it, as you kept sitting on it, wouldn't it eventually split the work like firework would? Is the question. I'm sure it's entirely possible. Megan,
it's getting
it's getting dark here in Cincinnati, or it's the cloud of locusts that we ordered. And I haven't seen that happen. So what happens with these, in the real world? I mean, yes, we can theory. Of course, this is a wedge, and as it enters the wood, it will split the wood, and yeah. But in the real world, when I look at Windsor chairs, English Windsors that would use this, is that what happens is it just gets tighter and tighter. The wood in the mortise compresses like the wood in the tenon as they kind of come together, and the people sit on them over and over again. If there were a huge force on the seat, if you dropped an anvil on it, yeah, it probably would split it.
Do I need to worry about my tapered mortise reamer getting too hot with an electric drill?
Yeah, but because they do get really hot, and they get to the point where they will lose their temper. They'll lose their hardness. They'll almost anneal. I don't know if they'll go fully soft. I'm sure I've annealed some, or my students have. We've reamed hundreds and hundreds of mortises with the tapered reamers. What I do is I just touch them up with a little diamond paddle, and just on the inside, not on the exterior. So I take like a red DMT and basically stone that interior face of the cutting face, the scraper. It's basically a scraper, and that renews it pretty well. And if it is soft, then it will get dull sooner, and then you're just back to tapering it or stoning it again. I don't really get too worked up about that stuff. If it stopped, I've never had one completely stop performing, and I've had them since they first came out. And students will do anything. I mean, I'm sure that we've almost burned this place down with the way some of the reamers were so hot.
We did think we set a bench on fire once.
We did thought we had set a fire when we were building the loafle holes bench. We were drilling, and Megan screamed at me to stop, and I stopped, and there was this huge plume that was filling, my face, and it was steam. So the wood was really wet. So the bit wasn't really hot at all. It was 212, but
Right.
that was
That's
alarming.
hot. Don't you think these stools would be stronger if they had stretchers?
Yeah, sure, in theory, but in reality, this is 2-inch thick rived oak, and this started out as 2 inches, and this thing is so stout. I mean, I could dance on it, and I won't, but maybe Megan will.
No, she will not.
You'll have to pay power, but
There is not enough.
so yeah, you can put stretchers on them, and I built a Welsh stool that looks very similar to this that was in my design book that has stretchers, but the legs are far more delicate. I mean, these are like baseball bats. If you built one, like I said earlier in the program, build one without stretchers. Don't assemble it. Sit on it and decide if you need stretchers or not. Your butt will tell you the answer.
All right. Are there tasks you used to do on a high bench that you just as soon never do again on a high bench after doing them on a low bench?
Planing up sticks. This is no fun on a high bench unless you have a high vise and then another attachment for it. But I'll sit here all day with a pile of sticks, and whether they're long sticks or short sticks. And this is, I could do this all day, and I do. It's one of the most, pleasurable aspects of chair making for me is getting to shape the sticks. And that's something I never do on a high bench anymore. The other thing, 2 things. So there are 3 things. That was 1. 2 is, this is my saw bench. We have some little saw benches that we use, for other things like finishing and assembling stuff. But when I saw stuff, I love sawing it on this because it's the same height as a saw bench, and it holds the whole work. I don't have to be shifting around 2 or 3 saw benches, especially with long rips. If you have a 7-foot workbench, then you'll be able to rip probably an 8-footer without having to move your saw benches around. And the third thing is mortising, as I showed in the video. You get to sit on the work, and that restrains it. And mortising is just a breeze compared to doing it at a high bench in a vise, or I wouldn't do it in a vise. Nobody does that. But with an accessory in my vise.
All right, and with 1 minute to go, this will be our last question.
Our last question.
And I'm pretty sure it's a joke, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Will there come a time when American woodworkers start making Purple Heart low benches with inlay?
Oh, I hope that's long after I'm dead. We make jokes about Purple Heart workbenches here because we tend to use very inexpensive domestic species. We think that's the best for workbenches. And so we sometimes make fun of Purple Heart workbenches. If you are in South America, you absolutely should use Purple Heart because that's that's a local wood that's very inexpensive, but it's crazy to use that up here. So thank you for your funny question. And thanks for sitting through this and listening to us. And Bean has come to say goodbye, but I don't think he's going to make it in a camera before we go. And
no, there he goes, yes.
Bean loves it when we get Hugh Lowe out. He's all over it. So maybe we can get Bean. Hey, Bean, you want to translate some Hugh Lowe? I don't know.
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope this was valuable. I hope it wasn't too awful. I think I'm done.
Yes.
Okay. Goodbye.